Welcome to Shadowland's Ghosts, a place where the veil between reality and the unknown is at its thinnest. I'm your host, Raven Blackwood, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey into the heart of darkness. As we sit here in the dead of night, surrounded by the faint glow of candles and the whispered secrets of the wind, I invite you to settle in and make yourself at home. It's a place where the ordinary and the mundane blend seamlessly with the extraordinary and the terrifying. Tonight, we're going to delve into a tale that will take you to the very edge of your seat. A late-night radio DJ, alone in their studio, receives a call from someone claiming to be in their very own building. But as the DJ searches the empty corridors and studios, they begin to realize that they're not alone. Or are they? You'll be listening to this tale from the DJ's own perspective, a first-hand account of the events that unfold. So, join me, won't you? Subscribe to Shadowland's Ghosts and become a part of our family of seekers and thrill hunters. Together, let's venture into the darkness and see what horrors await us on the other side. I settled into my worn leather chair, the creak of the springs a familiar comfort as I adjusted my headphones and gazed out the window into the darkness. The studio's neon sign cast a gaudy glow on the deserted streets below, a beacon calling out to the insomniacs, the lonely, and the lost souls who tuned into my show every night. I loved this time of night, when the world outside seemed to slow down and the only sound was the gentle hum of the equipment and the soft crackle of the radio waves. My name is Jake, and I'm the host of Night Waves, a late-night radio show that broadcasts from the top floor of the old WKCR building. It's a relic of a bygone era, with its creaky elevators and flickering fluorescent lights, but it's home. I've spent countless nights within these walls, spinning tunes and spinning tales to anyone who would listen. As I scanned the control panel, my eyes drifted to the clock, 2:47 a.m. The perfect time for a call from a listener. I leaned forward, my fingers hovering over the buttons, ready to take the next caller. And then it happened. The phone's shrill ring cut through the silence, making me jump. I chuckled to myself as I answered. "You're on the air, Night Waves. What's your story?" A low, gravelly voice spoke on the other end, sending a shiver down my spine. "I'm in the building, Jake. Right outside your studio." My heart skipped a beat as I glanced around the empty room, the shadows cast by the dim lighting seeming to twist and writhe on the walls. I smiled, thinking it was just another prank caller, but something in the voice made me pause. "What makes you think you're outside my studio?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. The voice hesitated, and for a moment, I thought the caller had hung up. But then, it spoke again, the words dripping with an unsettling intimacy. "I can see you, Jake. I can see everything." As I settled back into my chair, the creak of the springs seemed louder than usual, and the neon sign outside cast an otherworldly glow on the walls. My eyes never left the control panel, waiting for the next call, but my mind wandered back to the previous caller's words. "I can see you, Jake. I can see everything." I shivered, despite the warmth of the studio. The clock ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 2:52 nachts. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment. I glanced out the window, the dark streets below seeming to stretch out like an endless void. The shadows cast by the streetlights twisted and writhed like living things. I shook my head, chuckling to myself. "Just a prank caller," I told myself. But the voice lingered in my mind, sending a shiver down my spine. I tried to focus on the task at hand, scanning the control panel for any signs of life. The silence was suffocating, making me feel like I was trapped in a vacuum. Suddenly, the lights in the studio flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I spun around, my heart racing, as the fluorescent lights above the control panel began to strobe, casting an otherworldly glow on the room. I felt a presence in the studio watching me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The lights steadied, and the silence returned. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. It was just a power surge, I told myself. But the feeling of being watched lingered. I glanced out the window, the darkness outside seeming depressing on me. The neon sign cast an eerie glow on the walls, making me feel like I was trapped in a nightmare. I shivered, despite the warmth of the studio. The clock ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 2:57 a.m. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment. I waited for the next call, my fingers hovering over the buttons. And then it happened. The phone's shrill ring cut through the silence, making me jump. I hesitated, my heart racing, as I reached for the phone. Who was on the other end? Another prank caller? Or something more? I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I picked up the phone. You're on the air, Night Waves. What's your story? The voice on the other end was different this time. It was a soft, whispery voice, sending a shiver down my spine. Jake, I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for a long time. I felt a presence in the studio, watching me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The voice continued, the words dripping with an unsettling intimacy. I know all about you, Jake. I know all about your show. I know all about your secrets. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, my heart racing with fear. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The voice on the other end laughed, a soft, menacing sound. You don't know what's coming, Jake. You don't know what's waiting for you. The line went dead, and I was left staring at the phone in horror. The clock ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3 Uhr nachts. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment. I waited for the next call, my fingers trembling over the buttons. But the phone remained silent. The darkness outside seemed to press in on me, the neon sign casting an eerie glow on the walls. I felt a presence in the studio, watching me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The shadows cast by the fluorescent lights seemed to twist and writhe on the walls, like living things. I knew I had to get out of there. I had to leave the studio, to leave the darkness behind. But as I stood up, the lights in the studio flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, my heart racing with fear. I knew I was trapped. I was trapped in a nightmare, with no escape. The clock ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3 Uhr 4 nachts. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment. I waited for the next call, my fingers trembling over the buttons. But the phone remained silent. The darkness outside seemed to press in on me, the neon sign casting an eerie glow on the walls. I felt a presence in the studio, watching me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The shadows cast by the fluorescent lights seemed to twist and writhe on the walls like living things. I knew I was running out of time. I had to get out of there before it was too late. But as I turned to leave, I heard a faint whisper in my ear. "You're not going anywhere, Jake. You're not going anywhere." The voice was soft, whispery, and menacing. It seemed to come from all around me, echoing off the walls. I spun around, but there was no one there. The darkness outside seemed to press in on me, the neon sign casting an eerie glow on the walls. I knew I was trapped. I was trapped in a nightmare, with no escape. The clock ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3:06 a.m. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment. And then everything went black. As I slumped forward in my chair, the darkness enveloped me, and I felt a presence closing in around me. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment, now sounding like a distant scream. I was trapped in a nightmare, with no escape. Suddenly, the fluorescent lights above the control panel flickered back to life, casting an otherworldly glow on the room. The shadows on the walls seemed to twist and writhe, like living things, as if they were trying to consume me. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, my heart racing with fear. The clock on the wall seemed to loom over me, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3:08 nachts. I knew I was running out of time. The voice on the phone had been right. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew it was coming for me. As I looked around the studio, I realized that the presence I had felt was not just a product of my imagination. The voice on the phone had been real, and it had been watching me all along. I was trapped in a studio with something malevolent, something that had been waiting for me. The equipment on the control panel seemed to be closing in around me, the dials and buttons twisting into grotesque faces. I felt like I was being pulled into a living hell with no escape. And then I saw it. A figure standing in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the fluorescent lights. It was tall and imposing, its presence seeming to fill the room. I felt a scream building in my throat, but it was frozen in place, unable to escape. The figure began to move closer, its presence filling the room. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, my heart racing with fear. I knew I was doomed. I was trapped in a nightmare with no escape. The figure loomed over me, its presence suffocating. I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold and clammy. I tried to shake it off, but it was too late. The darkness closed in around me, and everything went black. As I lay there, I realized that the horror had been in the studio with me all along. It had been watching me, waiting for me. And now it had me. The last thing I heard was the sound of my own screams, echoing off the walls of the studio as the darkness consumed me whole. The clock on the wall ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3:10 nachts. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment. The studio was empty, but for the presence that lingered, waiting for its next victim. The darkness closed in around me, a suffocating shroud that threatened to consume me whole. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat, unable to escape. The hand on my shoulder tightened its grip, cold and clammy, sending a shiver down my spine. As I lay there, I felt a presence looming over me, its malevolent energy washing over me like a wave of dread. The clock on the wall ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3:10 a.m. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment, now sounding like a distant scream. The figure leaned in, its face inches from mine. I felt a rush of fear as I saw its twisted features, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The voice on the phone had been right. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew it was coming for me. And now it was here. The figure's breath was cold and rank, like a corpse's. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as its lips brushed against my ear. "You should have listened," it whispered, its voice like a rusty gate creaking in the wind. I tried to shake my head, but the hand on my shoulder held me in place. The figure's grip was like a vice, crushing me beneath its weight. I felt my eyes rolling back in my head, my vision blurring as the darkness closed in. The clock on the wall ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3:11 nachts. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment. And then everything went black. But even as I lay there, trapped in a living hell, I knew I wasn't alone. The figure was still there, watching me, waiting for me to wake up. The studio was empty, but for the presence that lingered, waiting for its next victim. The clock on the wall ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3:12 nachts. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment. The studio was waiting, patiently, for its next victim. I was the latest in a long line of victims, trapped in a nightmare from which I would never awaken. The darkness had consumed me, and I was gone. But even in death, I knew I would never be alone. The figure would always be there, watching and waiting for its next victim to stumble into the studio. The clock on the wall would always tick on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. And the horror would never end. The darkness closed in around me, a suffocating shroud that threatened to consume me whole. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat, unable to escape. The hand on my shoulder tightened its grip, cold and clammy, sending a shiver down my spine. And then everything went black. The darkness persisted, an endless void that swallowed me whole. When I finally came to, I was met with an eerie silence. The studio was empty, the equipment still humming softly in the background. The clock on the wall read 3:14 a.m. I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me back onto the cold floor. As I struggled to regain my bearings, I noticed something was off. The room seemed different, the shadows cast in unfamiliar patterns. I stumbled to my feet, my eyes scanning the room frantically for any sign of the figure. But I was alone. Or so I thought. I stumbled through the darkness, desperate to escape the studio and the terror that lurked within. But every door I opened led only to more corridors, more rooms, and more darkness. I was trapped in a never-ending labyrinth, with no escape from the horrors that haunted me. And then I heard it. A faint whisper, a soft voice that seemed to come from all around me. "You should have listened," it whispered, the words echoing in my mind long after the voice had faded away. I stumbled on, driven by a desperate need to escape. But with every step, I felt the darkness closing in around me. The shadows seemed to grow longer, the air colder. I knew I was being herded, driven towards some unknown fate. And then I saw it. A door hidden away in the depths of the studio. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out into the darkness. I pushed it open, hoping against hope that I would find freedom on the other side. But as I stepped through the doorway, I was met with a sight that made my blood run cold. The figure stood before me, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. And behind it, a sea of faces, all twisted in agony, all screaming silently in the darkness. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The figure reached out, its cold, clammy hand closing around my wrist. And then everything went black. When I was back in the studio, the clock on the wall reading 3:15 a.m. The room was empty, the equipment still humming softly in the background. But I knew I was not alone. The figure was still out there, waiting for me, watching me. And I knew that I would never be able to escape the darkness that haunted me. The horror would never end, and I would be trapped in this living hell forever. The clock on the wall ticked on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3:16 nachts. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of the equipment. And I knew that I would never be alone again. The darkness closed in around me, a suffocating shroud that threatened to consume me whole. And I knew that I would never awaken from this nightmare. I was trapped in a living hell, forever bound to the darkness that haunted me. The clock on the wall would always tick on, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. And the horror would never end. Epilogue, the echoes of darkness. Years have passed since that fateful night in the studio. The clock on the wall still ticks away, the seconds echoing through the empty rooms like a countdown to eternity. The equipment long silenced, the studio abandoned, a haunting reminder of the horrors that transpired within its walls. But the darkness persisted, a lingering presence that seeped into the very fabric of reality. The figure, a harbinger of terror, remained, watching and waiting. Its malevolent presence a whispered rumor, a cautionary tale told in hushed tones. I was never seen or heard from again, a ghostly apparition trapped in a living hell of my own making. Some say that on quiet nights, when the clock strikes 3:14 a.m., my screams can still be heard, echoing through the deserted corridors of the studio. Others claim to have seen me, stumbling through the darkness, desperate to escape the labyrinthine halls. But I am not alone. The figure is always with me, its cold, clammy hand grasping my wrist, pulling me deeper into the abyss. The faces, twisted in agony, still scream silently in the darkness, their torment a perpetual reminder of the horror that I endured. And I am forever bound to the darkness, a prisoner of my own terror. The clock on the wall continues to tick, the seconds ticking away with an agonizing slowness. 3:17 a.m. The silence is oppressive, punctuated only by the soft hum of my own heartbeat. And I know that I will never be alone again. The darkness closed in around me, a suffocating shroud that consumed me whole. But even in death, the horror did not end. For in the depths of the studio, the figure remains, waiting for its next victim, its next plaything in an eternal game of terror. And when the clock strikes 3:14 a.m., the cycle begins anew, the darkness spreading its tendrils, searching for its next prey. The horror will never end, and I am its eternal witness, forever trapped in this living hell of my own making. The clock ticks on, the seconds echoing through eternity, a haunting reminder that the darkness is always waiting patiently for its next victim. Thank you so much for watching the epilogue, The Echoes of Darkness. I hope you enjoyed this terrifying tale of horror and suspense. As I bid you farewell, I want to express my deepest gratitude for your support and engagement. Your enthusiasm is what drives me to create more content for you, and I'm honored to have such a wonderful community of viewers. As we wrap up this episode, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories, eerie atmosphere, and pulse-pounding suspense. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and join our community of horror fans. By doing so, you'll get access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insights, and early updates on upcoming episodes. Your subscription means the world to me, and I'm committed to delivering high-quality content that will keep you on the edge of your seat. So, if you're ready to embark on more terrifying adventures, don't hesitate. Subscribe now and join the ranks of our loyal viewers. Together, let's explore the dark corners of the human experience and face the horrors that lurk within. I promise you, it'll be a wild ride. Once again, thank you for watching, and I look forward to sharing more chilling tales with you in the future. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you won't miss out on any new episodes. Until next time, stay scared and stay tuned. Insert call to action, subscribe button, and notification bell. By subscribing to our channel, you'll be supporting the creation of more thrilling content, and I'll be able to continue sharing my passion for horror with you. Let's grow this community together and make it a hub for horror enthusiasts. Thank you again for your support, and I'll see you in the next episode.